We will come back to the second part of this, in which I will be explaining about what are the things that PharmD professional can do in a hospital. Before I go to the roles and responsibilities, let me tell you one thing in general. Nobody is going to teach you anything. You have to find out the ways also. Okay, I can guide you, I can show you the right way, but I can't come with you to the hospital and make things done. So here what I am doing is I am giving an outline. From that outline, what you understand and what you will apply in future, it depends solely on you. Another thing that I want to tell you is, like many people have asked me this question, that sir, when we go to the hospital, nobody is teaching us anything. The teachers are not bothered. The hospital is not at all bothered. Then what are we going to learn? So what I tell people is that when you go to the hospital, you are taking a particular case. For example, today you went to the hospital and you took a case of a patient who is suffering from hypertension. Now, naturally, the patient is suffering from hypertension. So the doctor has given the patient telmisartan 40 mg. Now, what you can do is, if nobody is encouraging you, nobody is guiding you, nobody is bothered about you, what you can do is, you can study the practical things about those medicines. For example, today I went to the hospital and I found that a patient has been given telmisartan. So what are the things that I can study about telmisartan? First of all, it is an angiotensin receptor blocker. So for that, I have to understand what is angiotensin. Angiotensin is a molecule which increases the level of sodium, which increases the level of fluid in our body that can cause hypertension. So what does angiotensin receptor blocker do? It blocks the action of angiotensin by blocking the receptor. So as a result, sodium level will reduce, fluid level will reduce. So as a result, your blood pressure reduces. So this is the mechanism of action. Now from this mechanism of action, you yourself can understand what are the ADR. If the level of sodium reduces in your body, if the level of fluid reduces in your body, definitely your blood pressure will reduce. So as a result, it can cause hypotension. And if it is a very elderly population, these people are advised to, if they are taking telmisartan, these people, especially the elderly population, they are usually advised to rest for some time or to sit at a particular place for some time after taking the medicine. Because if hypotension happens, they may experience dizziness. So as a result, they may fall down and the risk of accident may increase. Especially if a patient is taking antihypertensive for the first time, there is a risk of hypotension. And if that person is driving vehicle or dealing with dangerous chemicals or doing some kind of hazardous work, there is a risk of accident. So this is what I'm saying. So this no physician will tell you, no teacher is going to tell you, no, and in many textbooks, you may not find this kind of coordinated knowledge also. So for this, you have to read on your own, you have to motivate yourself, and you have to find your own ideas. Anyways, in future classes, I will explain you how to make your own ideas when you study about medicines and how to make it interesting. I will talk about that. This I just said in just as an example. Lot of examples are there. If I start telling all of them, then you have to come back for another meeting and I don't want to waste your time. So let's go back to what a PharmD student can do in a hospital. So these are some of the things that I wrote that a PharmD student or whoever it is can do. Obviously, when it comes to a professional, I cannot say all these things. Again, it depends on where you are working. And even if you are working as a clinical pharmacist also, are you exactly doing the authentic clinical pharmacist work? So that depends from person to person. But still, I wrote these things in general. One is ward round participation, medication history interview, medication order review, patient counseling, pharmacist intervention, drug information services, journal club presentation, publication and research works, case presentation, ADR meetings, and MOOCs. MOOCs means massive open online courses, or in short words, online courses. Now, as a professional, you may not be able to do many of this, or maybe as a student, you may not be able to do many of this. So I wrote it in general. Whenever you find time, you can implement this according to your scenario. Ward round participation. So theoretically, you know what it is. So I don't need to explain much. Ward round participation is very good actually. If you are in a hospital or working in a hospital where ward round participation is mandatory, and if the doctor is also cooperative, literally you can learn a lot of things. Because there is a stigma in our course that many of us are told that PharmD need not study about diagnosis. I believe it is a bullshit thing. Because if the diagnosis is wrong, then the treatment will also be wrong. So we should also know about diagnosis. And doctors can explain you very well how they found out that this person is suffering from a particular disease. For example, a patient is coming in the orthopedics department with spondylitis or spondylosis. If the ward round participation is happening properly, the doctor will tell you how the team of physicians or consultants found out that the patient is suffering from spondylosis. What are the diagnostic factors? So accordingly, you can make an idea whether the treatment given to that patient is correct or not. So that's why ward round participation is important. Now, whatever I'm telling you, all these points, it is not necessary that it may get implemented everywhere. So again, I said as a special disclaimer, these are all generalized things that I said. Medication history interview. For example, I'll just give you an example. A patient is admitted in the hospital with a cardiac arrest. A cardiac arrest developed, or maybe the patient had a very huge heart rate and then the patient developed cardiac arrest. And then CPR was done and the patient was revived. Now the patient is in the ICU. For example, the patient is having any cardiovascular problem. So the patient is being given aspirin, clopidogrel, rosuvastatin, or whatever it is. Now, when the patient was admitted in the emergency department, it is not necessary that in the heat of the moment, the history of the patient is documented properly. What if that patient was a diabetic one and the bystander forgot to tell you that? What if that patient was suffering from some other condition and because of the side effect of the medication the patient is taking, that particular disease got serious? So in these conditions, medication history interview comes into place. Medication history interview means you will be taking medicines only when you are feeling uncomfortable. For example, you are having a disease or you are having a symptom, only then you will take a medicine. So medication history interview means the healthcare professional is interacting with the patient, and if the patient is unconscious, then the patient is a pediatric, then the patient bystander, and trying to understand whether the patient had any history of this problem, or whether the patient is already suffering from some other diseases, or whether anybody in the family had suffered from this condition. So all these parameters can be covered. So if we understand the history of the patient, then we may be able to understand why the patient is suffering from this condition. For example, I'll give you an example. A patient came to the hospital with very severe breathlessness, and the doctor diagnosed as COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The patient is a smoker also, chain smoker also. When we look into the history of the patient, we came to know that the patient had a history of tuberculosis also. And if you search online or search for articles, tuberculosis has a very good connection with COPD because tuberculosis is a chronic inflammation. So chronic inflammation means it stays for long term. So even if the patient has completely recovered from tuberculosis, some residual effects always remains. And the patient is also a smoker, which is further damaging the lungs. So in this condition, we can understand how the patient got COPD. I'm not saying that in every scenario we can do this, but in some scenarios we can connect the past with the present and then decide the future course of action. So these are the parameters of a MHI form: patient medical history, patient medication history, social habits, whether the patient was a smoker or an alcoholic, whether the patient is a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian, because that is also important. For example, the patient is a non-vegetarian, the patient eats a lot of junk food and red meat and all, and the patient is obese and suffering from coronary artery disease. So in that condition, the social habit is important. So we can make also a connection is the past medical history connected to the present disease diagnosis. Was the patient taking medication for concurrent illnesses? In many conditions you may have seen that a patient is coming to the hospital with a disease, they have a comorbidity of diabetes or hypertension, but they either forgot to take the medicine or they are not taking the medicine thinking that they will control with their lifestyle modification. So in that condition also the disease may get severe, especially in diabetes, hypertension and cholesterol, it may get more severe. What type of medication was the patient under? Maybe the patient, for example, in osteoarthritis or osteoporosis or any arthritis related problem, maybe the patient had taken an allopathy or an Ayurvedic medicine. And with that, the patient was not feeling better. So the patient switched over to allopathy and now is admitted in the hospital. So like this, factors can also be there. Was the patient properly vaccinated? This is obviously in this, I don't need to explain this more. You know what is happening currently, the COVID scenario, or in foreign countries, influenza, the flu issue all are there. So you know this very well. Was the patient hospitalized for similar illness in the past? For example, the patient is now admitted to the hospital with severe chest pain and breathlessness, and it has been identified that the patient needs a bypass surgery. When we took the history of the patient, we understood that the patient had a history of angioplasty in the past. I hope you know what angioplasty and bypass, what is the difference. So like that also we can understand a lot of things. Now we come to medication order review. I know you know all these things. I'm just medication order review in simple terms. If we explain, it means finding out the rationality of the medicine. Rational use of medicine means whether the medicine is correct for the patient, whether the medicine dose is adjusted according to the patient's kidney and liver status, whether the medicine is given in the correct duration, whether the medicine is given in the proper dose. All these things we try to ensure in medication order review. Sometimes what happens, an antibiotic is given to the patient as a part of prophylaxis or empirical therapy, and the antibiotic is continued even after the culture report is sterile, and we don't know the reason why. So a lot of things means medication, the intention of a medication order review is to make sure that the medicine given to the patient is rational. Patient counseling, this is one department which I am very interested in. Personally, I believe that for a PharmD professional, patient counseling is very, very important. Even if you are a professional, even if you are a student, even if you are a clerkship student, or even if you are an intern. Because you are telling a particular patient or the bystander of the patient that you are suffering from a particular disease and you are giving them a lot of medicines. But you have to give them information whether to take the medicine before meals, with meals, or after meals. What are the things the patient should do while taking this medicine? What are the things the patient should not do while taking this medicine? So all these things come under a very interesting topic, which is called patient counseling. I will be taking a lot of classes on this in future. A lot of interesting things about patient counseling, which you may not have heard about. So according to me, patient counseling is divided into three. Disease-based counseling. For example, if a patient is diagnosed with myocardial infarction and the patient is discharged after treatment, we give them counseling that if you are experiencing chest pain again, or if you are experiencing any kind of pain in your chest which is radiating to your jaws, if you are experiencing breathlessness also, then don't forget to come back to the hospital or contact any healthcare center. This is called disease-based. Disease-based counseling means we are telling them the symptoms of the disease and in which condition they should be alert. Lifestyle modification means for a particular disease, what counseling, what are the food you should take, what are the food you should not take, what are the physical activities that you can do. For example, in diabetes, we can advise a patient to increase the intake of chromium, any food that is rich in chromium, because chromium helps in reducing insulin resistance and improves the functionality of insulin. If a patient is suffering from hypertension, we advise the patient to increase the intake of potassium, because potassium is the enemy of sodium. And in hypertension, we reduce the level of sodium. So potassium helps in reducing blood pressure. So these are some of the lifestyle modifications that we advise. And obviously therapy. Therapy means drug-based counseling. For example, amoxicillin, you can take it with or without food. But if you are taking amoxicillin clavulanate, please make sure that you should not take it with junk food, or you should not take it with any food that is rich in fat. Because if you are taking amoxicillin clavulanate with a high fatty meal or a junk food, obviously which is rich in MUFA, monounsaturated fatty acids, then the fat will interfere with the absorption of clavulanate. And if clavulanate is not there, then in some cases, amoxicillin will not work. So if you are taking amoxicillin clavulanate, I'm talking about tablet form. If you are taking amoxicillin clavulanate in tablet form, please make sure that the fat intake that you take, means the whatever food you are taking, the quantity of fat, it should not be a junk food, it should not be a very rich food. So this is one simple counseling that I told you about this therapy based. Counseling can also be given regarding use of a particular device or devices. So this though you know very well, like for example, insulin. When we give insulin to a patient, we always tell them that on the same day, if you are taking the insulin, you should not inject on the same site of administration multiple times a day. For example, if insulin is given to you to be taken twice a day, then you should not inject it in the same position, in the same arm. For example, if you're injecting in the left arm, then you should alternate it with the right arm, because there is a risk of lipodystrophy. There is a risk of injection site problems that can happen. You should change the site of administration. Similarly, for meter dose inhaler, especially if it is a steroid inhaler, usually the patients are advised to wash the mouthpiece properly and also to wash their mouth properly, because you know very well steroid means it reduces immunity. So there may be a risk of fungal infection. So patient counseling, I personally believe, I don't know what your opinion is, but I personally believe that patient counseling is very, very important and very interesting for a PharmD student or graduate. Pharmacist interventions. I hope you know what an intervention is. And this is a very controversial part, because even if we say sometimes that the medicine is wrong, the doctor is not ready to accept it. So we have seen a lot of scenarios like that. So if you are working in a hospital, or if you are doing your training, hospital duty in an area where the physicians are listening to you also, then you are very lucky, because there you can do pharmacist intervention. Intervention means if there is any problem with the medication, or if the medication should not be given to the patient, or if there is a risk of drug interaction or whatever it is, you are reporting to the consultant physician. The physician understands the fact and changes the medicine. So if you are lucky enough to do that, then I'm very happy for you, because it literally makes you feel good. It makes you feel that whatever you have studied till now, it makes some sense. Drug information services, I hope you know what it is. Drug, it is there in the name itself, drug information. Whatever you want to know about disease and about the medicine, there should be a special department in the hospital where you are guided for the same. Because a lot of queries come. For example, you are going in the rounds, the doctor is asking you, like I have written an example here. there may be many queries which either a senior pharmacist or maybe the DIC in charge or maybe the physician may ask you. So you have to find out the answer. So a drug information, a well-established drug information center can help you in that. So these are some examples that I wrote. Journal club presentation. I'm not sure exactly in many areas how it is done, but journal club presentation is also important. Obviously, for a professional, it is not easy, but for a student or an intern, it is. The benefit journal club means, for example, like in many hospitals for COVID patients, they are giving molnupiravir, which is a new medicine that has come in India, the dose of 800 milligram or something for COVID. So obviously molnupiravir is coming into the market because many people have published articles on it that molnupiravir is good. So what we do in Journal Club is that we try to find out articles which have recent studies, and we try to understand how they did the study and all those things. So that is called, and when we make it in the form of a presentation, it is called Journal Club presentation. If you want a demo of a Journal Club presentation that I did, I will send it to you. So you will get an idea what a Journal Club presentation is about. The benefits are it gives updated knowledge on disease management plan. For example, 1.5 years or 2 years ago, people were saying that hydroxychloroquine is good for COVID. And now nobody talks about hydroxychloroquine because the articles have made modification. Awareness regarding controversies of selected medicine. Just like I said, the hydroxychloroquine was a very big controversy. Many people took the medicine for absolutely no reason, and many people are now in the heavens because of this medicine, because it causes cardiotoxicity. So we are not sure whether the patient died from COVID or maybe from the side effects of hydroxychloroquine. Since we go through updated articles, we will also get an insight into what to do and what not to do while conducting a research. For example, you are personally doing a clinical trial or you are doing a project, then you can also understand what are the things you need to focus into when doing your work. Publications and research, this is actually a very controversial term because anyways in your 5th year PharmD, you have to do compulsorily a project. And I can personally tell you getting a project topic is not easy. And obviously in 6 months or 1 year, even if you do, there are a lot of challenges in that. I will talk about that in future classes. But yes, if you are doing a good project and the sample size is also satisfactory, then definitely it will get published in good articles, which is good for your CV. Because obviously, if you are publishing in small journals and all, you can say for the name's sake, but it does not hold much of a value, especially if you want to do higher studies. So anyways, I'll talk about this and all later. And there are also many controversies behind publications. Whatever things are that, I will talk about that. I will take a separate presentation for that. Case presentation. I am not exactly sure what your department faculties or what as a professional you are doing, but I am definitely sure of the fact that case presentation is important. Even if once a month you are presenting one case also, that is a big thing. Like many people tell you that you should have this many cases in a particular year, you have to 100 cases, 150 cases. I don't believe in that. I believe that even if you are taking 2 to 3 cases a month also, and if you are studying those cases properly, that is more than enough for your practical knowledge. Case presentation means you are analyzing A to Z about the entire disease, and then you are making your own interpretation and your own ideas as to why the disease happened and whether the treatment given to the patient was correct or not. Anyways, I think in my next class, day after tomorrow, if you are interested, then I will present a sample case that I took long back. I will present the case in front of you, so it will give you an idea. So these are some examples that I have written. What are the things that you can include in a case presentation? Pictures, relevant ideas, practical knowledge, all these things you can insert in a case. For example, in my case that I will present day after tomorrow, It was a case of heart failure and the patient was given furosemide. Most of the people, what they do is they simply write furosemide is a loop diuretic and that it helps in, they write the mechanism of action, they write the side effects and they say that this is it. Case presentation means why the medicine was given to this patient. That is important because pharmacology, nobody is bothered. Why it is given to that patient is the important thing. So for that, you have to search literature also. And then you have to connect it with the patient's scenario. So what I do is when I present some cases, I select articles and I try to find out in those articles what they are saying about furosemide in heart failure. So a screenshot of that I put in my slides rather than simply writing a lot of stories about that medicine. This is just my idea. I'm not saying that everybody has to do like this. Drug interactions also, in the case presentation, I wrote it like this. Anyways, I'll talk about that later. Drug-related counseling tips. As I said before, patient counseling. So if you're taking carvedilol, what are the things that you need to consider? If you're taking ramipril, what are the things that you need to consider? And then disease-related counseling. That means lifestyle modification. What are the things you should be worried about? And what are the food that you can take for hypertension? Now we come to the second last part, and that is ADR meetings. See, this is a presentation that I made. This was in my college. PPI induced bicytopenia. PPI means proton pump inhibitors. Bi means two, cyto means cell, penia means less. So bicytopenia means any two blood cells of your body has reduced. So this was actually a rare case report which actually happened in China, I think in 2018 or something, or 19 or something. So ADR meeting means any rare ADR if happened in any part of the world. So they will publish case reports. You have to find those case reports and make a presentation of that. So I will present one ADR meeting in front of you in future. So you will understand what I'm talking about. So ADR meeting is a meeting in which the presentations are made regarding rare cases that have recently been approved in standard journals. For example, paracetamol is causing kidney toxicity. I'm just giving an example. Paracetamol induced nephrotoxicity. So maybe it is very rare. It is not in textbooks also. So that is called a case report. So you got an article like that and you are talking about it. So this is one case report that I just took a screenshot from my desktop. Neutropenia and thrombocytopenia induced by proton pump inhibitors, which is the case report. So what I did is I downloaded this article, I studied it, and then I made a presentation of my own regarding this. You can look into this article and you will understand why this case is a bit rare. And the last thing that anybody can do, it's not just a student, it's not just a professional, anybody can do this. And that is online courses. When I actually started doing online courses in December 22, 2019. And since then, my passion has increased because online courses, the benefit is lot of people from international universities, they talk about lot of ongoing issues happening with healthcare. For example, somebody is talking about the treatment of breast cancer. Somebody is talking about the treatment of lung cancer. So what are the new therapies? What are the new treatment strategies? All these things you will not get in books, but you will get through online courses. So that is the benefit of online courses. And let me tell you one reality. Most of the institutions will never ask you to do online courses. The reason is, whenever you do an online course, only your name will come in the certificate. It is just like your PharmD degree. When you studied your PharmD, maybe you have been taught by your seniors, you have been taught by your faculty. But when you are getting the PharmD degree, your name only will be there. Similarly, in online courses, also the same thing. So many people don't support this idea because they also want a share in it. For example, in publications, what happens? Many people will force you to do publications because in that, many people's name will come. Obviously, if they have worked also. But in an online course, only the individual person who has done that course will get his name in the certificate. And that is why many institutions don't promote online courses or ask people to do online courses. But I personally believe that it is good for your practical knowledge, it is good for your CV, and it completely changes your mindset about new therapies, new diseases, rare diseases, treatment, and all these things. So the full form of MOOC is Massive Open Online Courses. They refer to online courses which aim at enhancing practical knowledge based on evidence-based scenarios. So this is actually good for your practical knowledge. So these are some examples that I wrote. Many people ask me which are the platforms that I can do online courses in. I first suggest them to start from WHO. In WHO, you will get an online course called Antimicrobial Stewardship. First, you try that. Once you clear it, then I will suggest you later which are the higher ones that you can do. And please remember, online courses are of two types. One is the free version and one is the paid version. If you are going for an online course of a paid version, maybe you will get the certificate, you will definitely get, but your investment is there. But in a free version, there are a lot of online courses which are given free. You have to study it, you have to give the MCQ or whatever it is, and you have to clear it, give the review or something and get the certificate. Please make sure that even if you are doing online course and once you get the certificate, don't forget that course. You try to revise it in future also. Otherwise, it will be a condition in which you have a lot of online courses, but you know nothing. So that is another thing that I would like to say. So these are some examples that I wrote. Physician Education Resource, Stanford University, University of Connecticut, PTC, that is Pharmacy Times Continuing Education, Prime Incorporation, National Jewish Health, WHO, etc. So these are some platforms that you can go for. So this is a sample methodology for hospital duty or whatever. Go to the respective ward, OPD or ICU, take a case and analyze it. Do the ward round participation if the physician is allowing you to. Update the patient data and day-to-day activities in the digital format. Get your daily activity documents verified by your preceptor in charge. This is for students and intern I'm talking about. Obviously, it depends on how interested the college is. Participate in case presentations, journal clubs, and other relevant practical discussions. Please remember, practical knowledge is very important. Use resources available in DIC to clear your queries or learn something productive. Guide your juniors as to how to take cases. Always remember, if you don't know anything, you are not going to teach anyone else. Streamline your hospital duty into achieving your career aspiration. Please don't study pharmacology and therapeutics just for passing the exam. It is a bullshit. You will forget everything in future. If you are studying something like that, please make sure that you remember it in a way that you can apply in future also. Anyways, I'll come into those details later. How you can study, how you can remember the dose of a drug. Lot of things are there in my mind. I'll come into that later. So in conclusion, having all said and done, regardless of how many amendments there are postulated, the PCI will keep on coming with new regulations. That is not a problem. But how much it is getting implemented in colleges and in hospitals in India, it is a big question. So it all depends on the coordinated efforts of the management, because the management in a college or in the hospital also needs to understand what is the relevance of PharmD. The faculty who is teaching the students should also understand what is the relevance of PharmD. And obviously the students and the interns also need to understand how good and excellent your course is. And obviously in the hospital, the doctors should also understand our relevance. I'm not sure in India how far the future is, but obviously in foreign countries, because of coordinated efforts, PharmD is a hit in foreign countries. I hope and I expect that maybe in near future, we will also have good scenarios in India as well. Let us hope that PharmD education in India be a hallmark of self-sufficiency and enhanced productivity. Because unless and until you are self-sufficient, your degree is just a dustbin for no use. So that's it that I wanted to say.